There we are. Hello, we are live, streaming live into YouTube and hopefully Rumble. This is Ayni Living Conversations, 73rd conversation, Crafting the Future, I titled this conversation. I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Woman. Aloha, Ayni Dao Living, a guide and inspiration and light. And I'm her, or the helper. What would be my title? I'm thinking.
You're my visionary companion, Julian.
Okay, visionary companion. I'm Julian Catari from Mexico, and we're streaming live, and we're going to talk about craft in the future. Has to do with craftsmanship, the skill that is so much needed to not consume and not depend on the industrial system, the industrial complex. So everything we need can be crafted, can be done. And not only does that take the power away from the bad guys, but it also gives us back so many things. Gives us back the art, the being involved with the art, with the creation, being able to adorn. I mean, instead of just buying this plastic chair, you can craft your own chair, and your chair can have you can craft your story into it. You can use it as a means of writing and telling and portraying your soul and what's inside of you. And I believe that's a much more richer way of living when you're able to do that. But to do that, we need to gather more than one person. We need to get out of the individualistic, everybody in their own home type of thing, and we need to come back into the tribe. So let's hear from you, Ingrid. What do you think? What have you prepared for us this week?
Oh, okay. So, Aloha, Ayni Dao Living is a deep, playful, spiritful craft making or crafting our world journey of providing the daily living needs of others and ourselves or yourself through the inward line of your heart. And we're going to talk about that inward line of your heart a little bit later. So as we've talked about the indirect covert aspect of ourself, which in the Hawaiian language is called our ku, our subconscious, memory is its function, right? We humans arose through the exercise of memory, reason, the lono, and skill in our world that was warming and blossoming. Memory gave reason its material, and skill proved memory gave reason its material, and then skill proved a thought to be true or not. And I've learned that many times, right? I read about it and then I do it, and it didn't work very well, but I learned how it could work better. That's been my education, my educare.
Okay.
So skill suggested a turn of the wrist, memory preserved it, and reason compared it. So the human attributes of courage, faithfulness, patience, fortitude, prudence, and honor were forged where faculties met in the making of home, in the making of our world, in the crafting of our world. So with and through partnership or intimate relationship between humans and the materials, the commonwealth of our earth, the oak tree being the most prominent, we humans have exercised our faculties, our innovation, and we've spread and multiplied to cover our whole planet. Our northern ancestors built their civilizations out of oak. A polished stone axe could take down a moderate-sized oak, and then seasoned oak wedges split it. As long as the oak logs were fresh cut or green, they were easily split into lengths along the lines of the prominent annual rings and along the radial rays to make plank paved boardwalks, sturdy boats, and buildings. So they didn't have saws, they split. Our human ancestors learned from the woods around them. And the more the humans came into intimate relationship with the oak, the more they found that it could do for them. And we'll find that too as we come more and more into intimate relationship with our tree standing sisters and brothers, our rock sisters and brothers, our plant sisters and brothers, the more they can do for us to provide for our daily living needs. So more than 6,000 years ago, our ancestors already were foresters. They had invented the system of coppice and standards, a practice that gave them the wood they needed without destroying the forest. Standards were the trees that were meant for load-bearing structural timbers. And oak was almost always the preferred standard tree, but they would only be cut once every 50 to 100 years. Other trees would be coppiced or cut to the ground every 5 to 25 years. The fresh sprouts were grown to the desired size and then cut again. This way, the humans, our human ancestors, could receive the daily wood, firewood, fencing poles, stakes, chairs, tables, couches, everything they needed for their daily living, as well as the bark for tanning, hides for tanning leather. And at the same time, the woods were preserved and renewed. This is craftswomanship or craftsmanship or craft making our world. In wood pastures where cattle, sheep, and goats and all other sorts of animals, four-footed animals were run in among the trees, the farmers instead learned to pollard the trees, which means cutting them to about shoulder level, so that the new sprouts were protected from the eager mouths of the animals. Again, this is craftsmanship or craftswomanship. They also knew that a cord of oak wood, which would be a stack 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, and 8 foot long, releases 23 million BTUs when burned. Even in a minimally efficient hearth, this represents the equivalent of more than 100 gallons of heating oil. That's one tree.
That's how much, if it's burned, how much energy it releases, or what's the BTU?
23 million BTUs, yeah. That's the BTUs are what's released when it's burned.
Okay, so it's like the contaminants that are released?
No, it's not contaminants, it's energy. It's the heating energy, the thermal energy. Okay. I forget what the long term of BTU is. I knew it, but I can't recall it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So throughout the length and breadth of Europe, the ritual and ceremonial fires at midsummer and midwinter, and whenever disease threatened the flocks, were kindled by a need fire. While the ritual or ceremony differed from region to region, one part remained the same, and that part always involved twirling an oak pole pressed into a hole drilled into an oak plank until the rubbed wood smoldered and the tinder lit. This was called a need fire, and it was the first fire of each new year and was the fire from which all the other fires of the community were to be lit. This is shamanic craftsmanship, craftswomanship.
Shamanic, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Our ancestors in the Somerset Levels, which is now known as southwestern England, had innovated how to make polished stone axes. This is after the flaking of flint. The flaking makes cracks that could easily be cracked off and broken. So after flaking, they figured out that they innovated that the stone could be ground and polished against sandy substrates until they had completely uniform cutting surfaces that shone that you could see your face in. So these tools were valued. They were polished and they were kept up over the years, and they were traded over long distances. This is craftsmanship, craftswomanship. And with these tools, the first bridges over bogs were built. This again is craftsmanship or craftswomanship. So our human mind and memory grew through the knowledge born of craft. In order to make, they had to imagine. In order to imagine, they had to make. Between thinking and making, the world we know now emerged. To imagine and make are Ayni, reciprocity. So in the Netherlands in 1957, peat diggers came upon a structure built of oak, made in 1475 BC. That's before Christ. That's how many centuries ago? So in 1957, how many centuries ago they came upon a structure of oak built how many centuries ago? 1457 BC, and it contained every carpenter's joint needed for houses or anything else built for the next 3,000 years. That is craftsmanship or craftswomanship.
Yeah, wow.
Our ancestor forest dwellers developed, and we call them primeval ancestors that didn't know shit. We think we're so much smarter than they are.
That's a big myth we need to, that everybody's probably, anybody hearing this could probably have that kind of bug in their minds. That's saying, but that's old, that's being primitive, and we are proving the contrary, that
right.
These crafts and these knowledges are more sustainable, they consume less energy, and they make better use of the materials, and it's like this idea of, have you ever seen the meme of a plastic spoon, and you know, the text says, who thinks that having to extract the oil, to make the plastic, you need a factory, you need all that infrastructure to take up the oil, all the infrastructure to make the plastic, all the infrastructure to make the spoon, all the transport to transport the spoon, so you can make or let's say a package, so that you can have something in a plate, like for a short period of time. Is that really easier? I mean,
yeah,
and it's
exactly not. No. So our ancestor forest dwellers developed a fine, supple intelligence or wisdom born of their intimate knowledge of the trees and woods. So the mixed-use forest held on as long as did the commons, which were the lands jointly owned by the people of a village or tribe. These people in Spain developed dehesas. A dehesa can still be seen in southwest Spain. A good dehesa looks like a park. And dehesas efficiently produce more per acre than any system of modern agriculture, with the products consisting of small quantities of many things, not a huge amount of any one thing. So in a dehesa, the cattle craftswoman or man knows how to rotate the cattle through the dehesa. The goat craftswoman or man knows how to rotate the goats, the sheep, the pigs, also, so overgrazing doesn't happen. The forester or arborist prunes the trees on a 7-year cycle to maintain an open structure, enough shade to protect from the harsh sunlight, with enough openness to produce more fruit and vegetables. The prunings then were used for firewood or to make charcoal, another craft. Where cork oaks are present, cork can be harvested on a 9-year cycle. So in the oldest dehesa in southwest Spain, the grape pollen was more abundant than oak, suggesting wine grapes were cultivated there. So wine is another thing that can be crafted out of a dehesa. So then, also from October to January, then the hogs were turned loose in the dehesas, doubling in weight during this time, gorging on the fallen acorns, and the hogs, the pigs, leave their droppings in exchange, fertilizing the trees and everything. So in short, a tract of land, or a dehesa, or in Andean, madica, provides grains, beans, cork, charcoal, tan bark, the meat and skin of goats, pigs, sheep, cattle, vegetables, fruits, and wine, and every other thing you need for your living. No one gets rich on a debesa. However, it sustains both the forest, humans, and animals. And everyone suffered if the land declined. So the debesa requires a complex code of care and nourishing allied to many, many crafts.
Mm-hmm.
So every moment of every day for a very long time, trees have been creating the two essentials of human life. They mine the air for carbon dioxide, and out of this airy nothing, they make both the free oxygen we breathe and the solid fuel by which we live. Fire made human civilization possible, and about 8,000 years ago, our ancestors discovered how to further distill the energy in wood, volatilizing the other substances out of the mass and creating lumps of almost pure carbon. So charcoal was the fuel that ended the Stone Age, For with it, one can smelt bronze and found iron.
Mm-hmm.
Later, charcoal also became a necessary material for glass making and gunpowder, as well as a drying agent for the hops and barley that make beer.
Mm-hmm.
So the craftsman or craftswoman, craftsmaking piece is learning how to burn a pile of wood very slowly, severely restricting the amount of oxygen in the pile, because a very slow burn converts the wood into charcoal without flame. This is a collier. A charcoal making craft is called a collier.
Okay.
Another craft, the smithy, craftswoman or craftsman, is the origin of the phrase to lose your temper, because steel is where the mine meets the forest. A great scythe, a knife for cutting grain, and even wood, small trees, is not made of iron alone, but of iron wedded to carbon through a process of refining. And I have a scythe. It's a very amazing way of expending your anger. That's another craftsmanship, is learning how to scythe a windrow in a short amount of time. And I don't know how to do that yet. But scythe.
What's that?
Yeah. It's a very sharp blade made for cutting down grain, it can take down a very sharp scythe can take down a 2-inch sapling.
It's like this curved thing?
Yeah, it's a curved blade that you put on a snath, a handle that the human swings.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I know what you're talking. It's what is on the Soviet Union's flag. Used to be
right.
Well,
that's a sickle, and a scythe is related to a sickle. Because a sickle you use with your hand. A scythe you hold in your hands, but you're swinging it with your whole body. A sickle you only use with your hand.
You should know about some Andean tools. Pretty cool. There's one, the wisu. Have you heard about it?
No.
It's this thing for moving the earth, but instead of using the hoe, which you use your arms and your back, with this you use your legs and the arms, and you don't need to bend, and you don't use the back.
Oh wow, cool!
And it's a leg powered tool. It's really, really revolutionary.
Well, so there's another crafts making experience. You'll have to tell me more about that.
I'll make you a plane, a thing to make it. I'll do that. Yeah.
Any right now I'm just relating craftswomanship things from one source only. I know there's a lot more. So
crazy.
Yeah. The same with a sword, and I was refusing to use the word sword. Instead, I chose the word scythe or sickle for tempering steel, right? So a great scythe or sword or sickle is not made of iron alone, but of iron wedded to carbon through a process of refinement. The effect of tempering is to relieve some of the stresses of the carbon-iron matrix while leaving enough of the temper intact to permit the scythe to hold its very sharp edge.
Okay.
So this is where the phrase losing your temper comes from. So if you, over the process of smithing, if you didn't keep the heat just perfect enough, your scythe blade would lose its temper and it would never hold a fine razor sharp edge again and really not be useful.
Okay, yeah.
So that again.
I know a little bit about that because I worked with metals for many years. I was a goldsmith.
Right.
So I had to temper steel and work with steel to make my crafts.
So you know all about the tempering.
How about
so
tempering?
if one knew the work it took to make one's blade hold an edge, and the danger one runs by overheating, one might be slower to give in to anger.
Yeah.
So that's craftsman or craftswomanship. Making blades, making knives, right? Again, need it for daily living. So moving on, the dolphin is manifestly impossible, yet it exists. Why is it manifestly impossible? Well, because they're often seen speeding alongside ships and passing them. To maintain this speed, the average 6-foot dolphin requires about 240 pounds of muscle, yet it only has 40. That's why it's manifestly impossible.
Yeah.
How does this happen? Well, the dolphin does not simply meet the oncoming waves like a sharpened beam. Rather, its shape constantly adjusts to present less resistance to water and wind. So in short, it wiggles while remembering to breathe, because dolphins do not automatically breathe. They have to remember to breathe.
Okay, yeah.
This is dynamic stillness. This is dynamic tension, wiggling to meet every resistance while remembering to breathe.
Yeah, dolphins
so
are
there is
magical.
no navy. Yeah, they are. There is no navy in the world that has managed to make a ship wiggle. However, 12 centuries ago, our northern European ancestors created boats of cleft oak that behave very much like living dolphins. People have managed to reconstruct boats in the image of the Viking boats. And when you stand in the bow of a ship made in that image, the whole ship moves around you.
So you stand there, it'll start spinning.
The whole ship wiggles. The whole ship wiggles. Right? And these boats made by our Viking ancestors lasted a minimum of 20 years, most of them in service for as long as a century.
Wow, yeah.
This is a stem ship, Craftsman, and it's the stem of the boat. The bow is the most important part. That's why it's called stem smith. The stem smith understood the shape of the whole. In shaping an object from his inner imagination, the stem smith emulates the creator. Any craft making artisan emulates the creator, because he or she insists on realizing what his or her inner eye can envision, connecting the inner to the outer. And that is the 61st hexagram of the I Ching.
61st. Oh, I'm far from that.
The stem smith had to imagine the invisible to design for the unforeseeable.
Yeah.
So that's craftsmanship or craftswomanship. A tree trunk of 3 feet in diameter split by an experienced craftsman could yield up to 20 usable boards. A board 1 inch thick split like this is as strong as our sod boards or sawn boards that are 2 inches thick. No wood was sawed in Europe before the 12th century.
Well, yeah.
A craftsman or craftswoman intellect is valuable because it is tested. A poorly made barrel will leak. A poorly made meal isn't fun to eat. In fact, it's disgusting.
Right.
So, until 200 years ago, intellect did not mean anything abstract. It meant the fullest use of all the human faculties in pursuit of the truth.
Something
On a
so
side road, yeah, I know,
so
right?
lost to industrial craft and mindset, and everybody just producing.
There's no crafting about industry. It's just exactly mass producing. So on a side road in sleepy Essex in southeastern England is the ancient Greenstead Church. It's so small it has no claims to fame. However, its simple walls conceal a building of great sophistication. The structure itself is not the point, because the building is about something.
Mm-hmm.
So a medieval poet wrote this: if a man has to lay the foundations of a house, he does not set rash hand to the work. The inward line of the heart measures forth the work in advance, and the inner man prescribes a definite order of action. The hand of imagination designs the whole before that of the body does. So the pattern is the first prototype, and then comes the tangible, the outer world. So first the inner world, then the outer world. The inner compasses of the mind must encircle the whole quantity of material beforehand. So for our medieval makers, craft makers, crafting our world, the inner world, their inner world, was the starting point, not the destination. It was a world where ideas met deeper and deeper funds of memory, and where new ideas mixed with old. So like the stemsmith, the carpenter has to see what cannot be seen. Both craft makers had to imagine and account for their creations, for the effects of mass like wind and storm. The stemsmith, however, had help from his medium, water. A boat is cushioned by water from the effects of gravity. Not so the building, because from the moment it is complete, it must stand against the force of gravity, which wants to constantly bring it down. So the carpenter was a master at joining one piece of oak to another in shapes and by means that would resist the worst weight and what weather could do. He had to have a deep visual imagination of the way forces act. That again is craftsmanship, craftswomanship. So the greatest work of the European Middle Ages is 660 tons of oak, the timber-framed roof of Westminster Hall. A man named Hugh Herland made it for Richard II between AD 1393 and 1397. And for the 6 centuries since, architects, scholars, engineers, and archaeologists have argued about how he did it, and no one has managed to reproduce anything like that since. That is craftsmanship. That is craftswomanship. Mr. Cooper. So if we ever get the opportunity to watch a wet Cooper work, it's an amazing craftsmanship process. He starts with raw white oak, cleaves it into staves, cuts the staves to length, shaves out a concave and convex side with draw knives of different radii, and shaves the square edges of the staves with a jointer into radius lines that will intersect the cask's center. He raises up all the staves around one temporary hoop and adjusts them to fit, then heats the wood with a small fire in the center of the cask so the wood will bend. He circles and circles the sweet-smelling hot oak, driving on hoop after hoop. He keeps the fire going to set the final shape. And once it cools, he scrapes out the inside of the new cask, either smoothing it for beer or roughing it for wine and whiskey. Then he cuts and joins the cask ends, scribes a circle in the wood at the chime ends to hold the ends, and fits them and finalizes the hoop. He augers out a bunghole and fits a stopper. The cask is made without a ruler, a tape measure, or a protractor, or any of the tools of our precious age. and he turns sticks of wood without these tools into a shape of enormous complexity. A handcrafted cask seems to be both a cube and a sphere at once. Try to imagine a container that holds anything from bourbon to nails to butter in quantities weighing up to half a ton, so 1,000 pounds, without breaking or leaking. It sits firmly on its end. It can be stacked 5 high, and yet you can also roll it down the road, applying the slightest pressure to either end to change the direction it's rolling. That's craftsmanship or craftswomanship. Each stave is a straight-grained, knotless piece of oak, wider in the middle than at the ends and bent to give a belly to the cask. If it's not all done rightly from the get-go, it either won't fit or your barrel will be askew and be leaning. If your barrel leaned, if your cask leaned, if your barrel leaned, the other man in the shop would tell you you'd made a lord, as in drunk as a lord. So when I read this, I had to laugh because my very religious mother worships the Lord, and I'm like, does she only know what she's worshiping?
It's also funny to think of a lord like a man lord that's always drunk because he's the lord. He's got plenty to drink, and so he's always drunk.
So if your cask had too little of a belly, they would tell you you're nothing but a carpenter.
Okay.
So the making of casks was a complete mystery, and that's not M-Y-S-T-R-I, it's M-I-S-T-R-I. So the boy who wished to learn the trade would likely never have heard of geometry, but after 7 years of apprenticeship, he could make a cask of any volume and earn the right to be called a mister or master of a trade. Hence the title Mister.
Okay.
Again, we have no clue what that's what Mister really is. Yeah.
These knowledges that have been purposely taken away from us.
Yes. So Mister meant a person that had mastered a complex task and could do it reliably well. It signified a high level of coordination between hand, eye, and brain. The Misters were men at that point, just men. So Misters could now be men and women who had trained their intelligence to a high level by encountering and transforming resistant materials. There were more than 100 different shapes and sizes of the barrel made by the wet coopers alone. Wet coopers are those who make it for liquids. Light coopers were people who made barrels, casks, and churns for milk products. And they made more than 35 sizes and types. And then the dry coopers who made it for the storage of nails and other, right? They made another 100 or so. This is craft making.
You're making me start to feel a lot of I'm starting to miss my old craft of goldsmithing. I'm starting to want to do. Now I'm starting to understand why I loved it so much.
Yeah, well, you know, the great thing about coopering and other craft making is that it occupies the brain, the hand, and the emotions all at the same time. There's a resistance to the completion of the task, and this has to be met by the craftsman's know-how, a composite of his or her knowing and remembering and action. So memory, reason, and skill are God's 3 gifts to human beings, and the simultaneous activity of the 3 might just be a requirement to become and remain a human being. Craft making is a school of patience. Patience is what you acquire by working again and again and again on resistant materials. There is never a right or wrong, only a closer and closer approach to the wholly useful.
Right. Like with music as well. I was figuring that my song is never perfect. It just gets better the more I play it. You know, the more I play the same song, the better I play it. But I'm never like 100%. because it always gets better the more I play it.
Right. Well, 100% is getting trapped in the certainty, which there's nothing certain about life. No. So that's a whole nother conversation. But patience is the mother of joy. It is through patience that we can endure each other's company long enough to love. Through patience that we can cooperate in a task, and through patience that we can go from abysmally bad to wonderfully.
So let's connect two things here, because here's the magic of making connections, where if you lose this craftsmanship because people now all they do is follow protocols, most people have lost this knowledge of how to do something, like really make something, and right. all they know how to do is to follow protocols in the computer, is like fill out formulas. That's what a lot of jobs are about today. And you see these young people, and they have a really hard time having relationships. I mean, they just rather have like followers on their social media. That's as far as their love their human connection goes, is having like likes on their, posting stuff and getting likes.
Yeah, their social media, exactly.
Because they have no patience. They have no patience with another person. They have no knowledge. But let's see how that is related to the craftsmanship, or lack of.
Let's say this again. Memory, reason, and skill are God's three gifts to human beings, and the simultaneous activity of the three might just be a requirement to become and remain a human being, because the great thing about craftsmaking is occupying the brain, the hand, and the emotions all at the same time. Mm-hmm. If you're so busy carving out both the convex and the concave side of a piece of wood, you don't have time to be worrying about what the person sitting next to you is thinking of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But these are great examples of how, like, developing skills in one thing develops your skills, your human skills in other areas.
Exactly. Everything is a continuum. It's not separate. It's a wholeness. So it is through patience that we can restrain ourselves from wasting our lives in anger and disappointment. The patient person waits, listens, expects, hopes, nurtures, cares, remembers, speaks, trusts, and is courteous. So Mr. Tanner is another craft making skill, which I am currently putting my hand, mind, and emotions to. Tanning hides. And we're not going to go into that, but permanence, dignity, strength, and grace. These are the qualities that men and women sought in the oak tree. The same oak stood from generation to generation. The very form of the tree suggests patient power, because it can hold a 3-ton branch straight out sideways as far as the trunk is tall. Mm-hmm. Crush the gall of the Kermes oak and you get a lovely scarlet dye. Crush the gall of the Aleppo oak, which grows in Turkey, and mix them with the iron for a deep blue-black dye or ink. So the oldest surviving recipe for ink comes from the Marcianus Capella's 5th century encyclopedia of the 7 free arts. Gall ink was initially the most sought out ink. However, it was found out that because it was made of the gall of oaks, the writing itself was the cause of destruction, because the gall ink ate the paper over time. That's why so many ancient works have been destroyed, because the gall ink ate the paper. Oh, wow. So getting to the big ships, the tall ships, like the USS Constitution, that were still built of oak, we have to come to the shipyard. That was not an assembly line like the Ford process or the Toyota process, but rather an assembly of the crafts, because it took a lot of craft makers to build a tall ship, and nothing went to waste in the shipyard, the assembly of the crafts. 3 times a day, the women would come and gather the chips for firewood and charcoal making. The sawdust went into the fires over which the tallow for graving or pitch for caulking was heated. And that was craftsmanship. That was an assembly of craftsmen to make one big item that would last for thousands of years. And there are so many other examples of crafts making. Like there's a family in Italy that still does metal designs on hand-woven fabric. That's another ancient textile printing. That's another ancient art. Rust printing on fabric. That's what it's called. So we could go into this deeper and deeper, but this is what Aloha Ayni Dao living is. Craft making our world, providing for the needs, the daily living needs of ourselves and others, so that we all flourish together.
And so that we stop needing to buy Chinese shit.
Right.
How are we going to solve the China problem? By stopping by not buying stuff by not being so dependent on clothes and pots and whatnot comes from China today, you know.
Well, and by also those people who are craftsmen have been taught by the spiritual gurus out there that their value is taught in how much money they charge, because money is inexhaustible, which it is, because it's just digits in silica. However, it's a god. We've made it into a living thing instead of a tool. Money is only a tool.
Right.
Money is nothing but a tool.
Mm-hmm.
So we get caught in the cheap. Well, I can't afford to pay $150 for a shirt that someone handcrafted out of cotton, spun and wove, right? There's the I forget
that's just the mindset. I mean, because that's going to last you a lot more than any other thing.
It will. However, when I have villagers to feed, I'm not going to spend $150 just on a shirt for myself. That benefits only myself. You understand what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah, but also you're not going to buy stuff, you're going to make it.
Right. This is where the village tribal craftsmanship comes in. The remembering that you are a family, that you're not an island that can just go purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a wet cooper, for instance, or in like what's the matriarchal community in Mexico?
The
Zapotecs? Yeah, the Zapotecs. Yeah. Right? The women that make the ribboned dresses for their festivals, that's all they do. But they know that because they're making it for everyone every woman in the village, they will receive everything they need to maintain their living. They don't have to worry about how am I going to feed myself. They know that in exchange for being the craftswoman of their fancy party dresses, they will be fed, they will be clothed, they will be nurtured, they will be supported. And that's what a tribe of crafts making is about. Old growth culture.
Yeah. And it touches on this subject touches on technology, I think, as well. you said that our minds sometimes are fixated on thinking this is not worth it, this is too expensive, this is too primitive. You know, I thought of a couple of examples in the Andes. In many years ago, when we used to speak about this in these workshops, where, for example, there's some communities might be having drought problems, right? So there's this need to store water. So they're building these huge cement water tanks, and they were all hyped on that. And this guy, this not really a friend, but this guy I know, he was. They paid him for a project to build, I don't know how many of these cement tanks. The government was paying him to go to small villages in the Andes and in the drier parts of the Andes, in the Altiplano. And so I tell a friend of mine who's always, you know, knows a lot about this ancient stuff, and he's like, well, that's really stupid. I'm like, really? Yeah. He says, don't they know anything about Andean technologies? Because he says there's this plant. So all you need to do is build a kind of like a big hole where you're gonna want to store the water, and you put this plant. It's kind of like a moss or something that you have it grow, right? And that insulates the whole thing. So you can, so the rain, once it rains, that thing will store the water forever. The water won't seep in anymore. So you don't need the $20,000 cement
material. Yeah.
This $20,000. I mean, how expensive is to build a ferro cement tank?
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah.
But there's the mindset. Nobody. Oh, they're so into they can only think about cement. They can only think about machines. They can only think about they really
the new
have a hard
technologies.
Time. But they're right. I mean, then the new technologies are kind of not really that good.
No, they're stupid. They waste away. They last. They don't last. What we consider primeval, primitive, what we've already touched on. Oh, they were so primitive for doing that.
Yeah.
But yet, no U.S. Navy no Navy in the world, not just U.S. No Navy in the world can make a ship that wiggles like a dolphin.
Like the Vikings did. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And there's so many examples. I can think of another. In the Andes, and I think many places in the world that have very, very ancient sites, you'll see that the stones have a perfect fitting. They have these constructions, the stone constructions, and we know already that this is called it's a type of what's the word? There's a word for it.
For the stone, the stone craftsman. Yeah.
Stone molding, right?
Right.
So, and we come into this thing that happened even that happens all the time. When if you're not told to look for something, you can't see it, even if it's in front of you, right?
Right.
There's this story about when the Spanish came, and there's this natives out on the coast, and the ship was right there, and they wouldn't see it because they just could not imagine the ship, so they wouldn't see it.
Right. They had no frame of reference, so they couldn't see it.
Right.
Yeah.
So this happens a lot with these ancient technologies, where they really can't imagine that how these constructions were really made, which is by molding the rock. They would put this, and there was this guy who figured out that the recipe for this, and then he would disappear. He was probably killed or something. So you put this, there's this plants, you make this plant mixture, and then you soak the rock with that plant mixture, and the rock becomes a little mushy, right? And then you can put another rock on top of it, and they will, like, since it's mushy, they will join together. And then you can even carve it a little bit, because it's soft, it softens the rock.
Right.
And that's how many of these constructions, but I've seen, there's this documentary about this European guy who is wasting, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, because he got a grant to do some research on how these constructions were made. And his theory was that they would put the rocks on top of each other, and they would carve it, you know, hard to make it fit. And he was trying to prove that that's the way they did it, but he would not prove it, because that was not the way they did it.
Right. Right.
His what's the word, exercise, or his experiment was a complete failure, because of the joints would have spaces. If you do it that way, it's not the way it was done. So there's so many,
right. Well, like
so many things we don't know how.
Yeah. Right.
But
660 tons of oak still standing today, and nobody can figure out how he did it.
Right. And we think that this is a big mystery that is never going to be known, and we don't realize that limitation is that mindset, that not being brave enough, curious enough, adventurous enough, you know, really willing to doubt your own mindset and say, wait a minute, what if, like you're doing all the time, wait a minute, no, why must I limit myself thinking I can't do this? This can be done, right? This is possible. And once you change that mindset, then and there it comes, you see it, you know, you see the ship that's out there, because you've opened yourself to discovering something that is there, because the knowledge is there. It's just laying there. It's there for us to just change our mindset of not wanting to change, of not wanting to get out of the victimhood, because it's all related, right?
Right. Our comfort zone, our small little comfort zones.
Exactly. Yeah. And once we get out of that, we'll start seeing all the different technologies and solutions. And I mean, even here in the city, I all the time I'm learning with plants, for example, how the relationship with the plant has a lot to do with how the plant grows. It's not about just the soil, or does it have nitrogen, does it have phosphorus or whatever. It also has to do with the consciousness of the plant, how the plant, you know, the plant will say, hey, I'm too much in the shade here, but that's something that the plant tells me. That's not something that I would figure out mechanically, you know, if I didn't have the ability to the plant.
Well, and plants make music, and our bodies make music too, and people have been able to put speakers on plants and hear, like our friend that promotes us, his relative has done this, and he jams with a plant in his greenhouse. He's a musician, and he jams with a plant in his greenhouse, and he's made records of this.
Yeah.
Right? This is, remember what I said at the beginning, through learning with the oak, through the intimate relationship with the oak, they found out how many more ways the oak would allow them, would work with them to craft into making what they need it for their daily living. And that's the key, is our intimate relationship. with everything. Now in the Spanish dehesa, and I'm going to start adopting that term instead of the word ranch. I really like the word dehesa. In the ancient, in the Spanish dehesas, the people would, like say one family did pigs, and it's kind of the same in the Himalayan village that I talked about. The villages, they would, their lower floor, their ground floor would be the home of the pigs, and they would live above on the second floor. So they're true, and it's still that way in Spain today. The ground floor is the subfloor. The first floor is actually the second floor, what we call the second floor. And so the local pig herder or pig follower would come every morning to come gather all the pigs, and the pigs knew that person as well as they knew their family, and they'd go out for the day to forage. And then in the evening they'd come home to their family, and God forbid you should get in the way, because you try to get in the way of a 600-pound running pig, you're done. Right? But they knew where they lived because they were intimately related to the family that lived above them. And now we just put our pigs, all our livestock in pens, let them be in a pasture, cut down all the trees so that we can make hay, leave only one tree for them to gather under for shade, and don't even have a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So this is where being a cattle craftswoman or craftsman is much more than herding or milking or converting to food or tanning. It's all of those above, but it's also becoming intimate with your cattle.
And with that,
letting them teach you all the ways they can supply for your needs.
It's also letting go of being the know-it-all and the I know it everything and being open
because I'm human, I know everything, and I'm dominant.
Right. And you know, instead, what if the cow knows something I don't know? What if the cow can teach me something?
Well, that's just it. Instead of herding, you take the herd of cattle out for the day. You follow them and watch what they eat. Right? Watch what they do, because they know what to do to keep themselves healthy.
Right. That observation of nature, that's something also very, I mean, all those people that are meditating and their meditations are about themselves inside of a room, wanting to close out all stimuli from the outside. I would rather have them watch what an ant does, or watch what this little insect, find out what does this insect, what does this insect do, right? What's his life about? Whoa, that's you require a lot of patience to just watch the little insect go around and wait until, because you know, whatever he's going to do is not happening all the time, so you need to wait and observe and be, and also have the consistency to come back and watch it again and watch it again. Oh, and there you go. If you're able to focus your attention
right
onto long enough and consistently enough and patiently enough without all that noise of your mind, because the mind, I mean, the mind is like that. The mind wants to be playing a game all the time. Your mind wants to be planning. Your mind wants to be, you know, your mind's a hyperactive thing. So you need to.
Well, and especially if you don't know who you are and you're not tuned to your inner self, you're not following the inward line of your heart. We don't understand that all our thoughts, everyone's thoughts are out there in a collective soup. So if you don't know who you are, you're going to receive everyone else's thoughts. So when you're going into meditation and you don't know who you are, I mean, and it's not just the mind, it's our DNA. We have 125 billion miles of antenna in our body. That's always out there, transmitting and receiving, transmitting and receiving, transmitting and receiving. So we get so attached. We get so, well, I can't quiet my mind. Well, don't freaking try to quiet your mind. Just remember your lono, your uhane, your conscious mind's purpose is decision making, choice making. So constantly direct it, constantly direct it. Set that radio dial. What frequency are you looking at? I'm looking at focusing on this, right? And if the other thoughts come in, they just come in. You don't attach to them and run out of the train station with them. You just keep your mind, your lono focused. Focus, 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 focus. While wiggling like a dolphin. Because that's what it is. It's a constant wiggling.
Wow. Yeah. So let's start finishing up. I want to mention how important this conversation is and this topic is to understand what Aloha Ayni living is, what somebody that would be part of this would imagine himself being, how important it is to have craftsmen and craftswomen in the villages and the marcas where they can do crafts and they can become really someone that is beyond good at what they do. You know, they can.
You're right.
Right,
and that's the part. If you don't give, that's the part of, what is it, Yachai? Or Yankai?
Yankai is the work, the middle world.
That's the Yankai. If you're not contributing your crafting ability for the means of daily living, then we will be forever bereft, and heaven will compost your body so someone else can do it. It's just that much. Just that simple.
That's the other harsh thing that we are lovingly saying once and once again is we are at a time when maybe the Lucifer experiment, the modern world experiment, yeah, it needed to exist. It existed, but it also like everything has to come to an end. Every living being must die, if otherwise it wouldn't be alive.
Right.
So the modern world is going to die. The industrial complex is and has to die. So it's not about when, it's about are you going to be dead with it?
It's not if, it's when. Right? It's not if, it's when.
Well, I would say it's when. I mean, because it can. I mean, we don't know when it's gonna. I would say it's already dead. I would say it's already useless. It's already
it's in its dying stages. But that's, when I joined the military, it was during Desert Shield and Iraqi freedom. The mantra was, it's not a matter of if you're going to be deployed, it's a matter of when. That's why I'm saying it's not a matter of if it's going to die. It's not a matter of if the Titanic is going to sink. It's going to sink. It is. Right. It's sinking. It's dying. It's when. When is it going to be totally gone? Well, when enough of us say no. No more. No more. We're going to do it this way.
That's one of the things to keep in mind, that if we don't draw away from it, I mean, how can we? And that seems to be totally outside of the imagination of all the intellectuals that write about civilization and sociology and whatever. They really can't put it together and figure that all it takes is getting out of it. Enough people getting out of it. Enough people that will stop paying taxes. Enough people that will stop voting. That will stop believing in the system. And that's all it takes. But it's not. I like to think that's one part of it. That's when if you care about the world. But then if you care about yourself, the other part is caring about yourself. And caring about yourself is, how long are you going to be living in a dead world. How long are you gonna be nobody? Don't you want to become somebody like right now?
Right.
Don't you want to like
Well,
become alive? And that's what Aloha Indian Now living is just
yeah.
come alive, come care about yourself as well, and stop giving your life and your energy to something that is dead, that is obsolete, that is no good, that is not going to work, that is never going to work, it's never going to
Right.
prosper or fix itself or change or whatever. So it's made to get worse. All I see, it's just gonna get worse. There's no point in staying here. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, no, because it's a system totally out of balance. Our yang is totally out of balance. So we can talk quickly about the difference between boy, moi, and man. The boy is the one who grows the boy, right? And we all, even as a woman, I was a boy too while I was a girl, because we all have yin and yang inside of us. Then there's the moi. Well, what is the moi? That is the boy in a man's body that has achieved great strength and great whatever, but it's all boy energy. So what if you take out the o, what are you left with in moi? My truck, my ranch, my farm, my, right? The man lets that child die, lets that child grow up, parents that child to grow up, to serve, to work, to not just serve himself, but serve the need, to work for the needs of everyone else, so that we all flourish. And the man, the boy, moi, man applies to all of us, whether we're male, female, and there haven't been men for centuries. And don't take that wrong, Julian, right? Don't take it personal. There haven't been men for centuries because we've been mois for so fucking long.
Right. There hasn't been a man that looks to really construct something and really take care of a family or of a tribe.
Well, and they were men in the matriarchal societies. There were no mois in the matriarchal society, right? Because they knew they were equal. The moi does not know he's equal. The moi needs to dominate.
Right. So, well, that's a lot. And yeah, craftsmanship. It's an important part, knowing that it's not just speaking and the shamanic work is not just about what you would normally think about shamanic work. Because I see all these. I mean, think of Osho, for example. Did he ever grow something? Did he ever work the land? Did he ever craft something? Right? And all these gurus, do they have they ever crafted something?
No.
And it brings me back to my dream. What I had a dream very early about this Mayan elder, and in my dream I would get to him and he was crafting something, and I would think, this is not what I was expecting. I would expect a wise man to be doing wise things. Why would he be crafting something? That's not transcendent. That's not spiritual. And I lived that. I met like a few months later, I traveled to the Maya lands, and I met this. My dream came true, and I met this Maya elder, and he was there crafting, silversmithing, making jewelry. And I'm like, if you're a wise man, why are you making jewelry? and now I have my answer. Today I have my answer.
Yeah.
And we shared this answer with you. So what would be the next subject for the next conversation?
Well, since Aloha Ayni Dao Living is also all about self-governance, let's go into the self-governance principles.
Okay. That's cool that
standard.
in a conversation we had today off the live stream, I mentioned that I really like the self-governance principles, and I think it's important to share that and have it known, like that you have principles. What are the principles of, you know,
Right.
of Aloha Ayni living? So that'll be the next conversation then. If you don't have anything else to add, Ingrid, I'll just invite people for next week at 6:30 Central Standard Time. And if you want to know more or join Aloha Ayni Living, it's alohainidaliving.com with one A between Aloha and Ayni. And you'll find links everywhere around here on the whatever platform you're watching this, so that won't be a problem. And you're invited to join and to listen to us next week. And many blessings for everyone, and thanks especially to you, Sacred Blue Heron Woman, for all this knowledge, all this wisdom that you come and share with us openly as a gift. It's a wonderful gift.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to share.
Well, so it's got to be me that starts the live stream. I'll do that.
Yeah.
We're gonna like.
Got that clear now.